Something quiet has been happening beneath the surface of modern life, and it is not confined to public life. It is happening in private apartments, lit by the blue light of a phone screen. It is happening in the space between a message sent and a message ignored. It is happening in men who look composed at work, competent in the daylight, and then begin to unravel at night, not with drama, but with a slow, disciplined kind of self-erasure. You can tell when a man's life has started to turn against him, when his attention stops being his own. He becomes available before he is invited. He begins to orbit something he cannot name. A notification tone is enough to lift him out of his body. Silence becomes an interrogation. He rereads conversations like scripture, searching for the line where his dignity began to leak out of him. He tells himself it is love, or loyalty, or being a good man. But the body language betrays him. The shoulders pulled forward, the jaw clenched. The sleep is shallow and broken. The gym visits were missed, then rationalized. The work focus dulled, not because he is weak, but because he is internally negotiating with a force that never sleeps, the need to be chosen. It often begins with a misunderstanding he doesn't even realize he's participating in. He believes boundaries are a weapon, something harsh, something cold, something reserved for arrogant men. He believes that if he is patient, agreeable, and available enough, loyalty will come as a reward. He believes devotion is proved by sacrifice, and so quietly, he starts paying for affection with his time, his attention, his principles, his schedule. He does not see that he is training the world and the woman to treat him as a resource rather than a man. I have watched this pattern in men who are intelligent, disciplined, and outwardly strong. Men who can build businesses, lift heavy weights, endure pressure, and lead teams. Yet the moment romantic uncertainty enters the room, their inner architecture collapses. They become contractors of their own self-respect. They remodel their values to fit someone else's moods. And then they look up one day and realize that the life they are living does not belong to them. There is a particular kind of man common now who is not heartbroken in the cinematic sense. He is drained. He is not even angry. He is numb. He keeps scrolling because silence feels worse than poison. He keeps initiating because he cannot tolerate the idea of being irrelevant. And he does not notice the smallest humiliations, apologizing for things he did not do, over-explaining simple intentions, waiting outside someone's emotional gate like a servant, turning his standards into bargaining chips. In ancient Rome, Seneca watched men do this without smartphones, without dating apps, without endless digital competition. He watched how desire makes a man pliable. He watched how fear of loss turns the mind into a pleading instrument. He watched how power, when misunderstood, becomes cruelty, and how boundaries, when misunderstood, become isolation. And he offered something rare, a calm, surgical form of sovereignty that does not need to threaten, persuade, or chase. By the end of this, you will understand precisely why boundaries are not the opposite of love, but the only structure strong enough to hold it, and what it quietly destroys in you if you keep mistaking self-abandonment for devotion. Seneca lived in a world where power was not theoretical. It had a face, it had guards, it had exile, it could erase you with a sentence. He served near the center of an empire that could make you wealthy in the morning and dead by nightfall. And he wrote, not as a monk above life, but as a man inside it, watching the same human machinery repeat itself. Hunger, fear, pride, desire, status, attachment, shame. The Roman world was brutal in public, but it was psychologically subtle in private. Men played games of loyalty and betrayal. They built alliances. They postured. They begged. They knelt. They called it love, or honor, or friendship. But Seneca recognized the underlying economy. Men trade their inner freedom for external approval and then wonder why they feel enslaved. His work survives because the environment changed, but the mechanism did not. Today, the empire is in attention. The Senate is social media. The courts are public opinion. The exile is being ignored, unfollowed, replaced, shamed, or discarded. The sword is not always legal power. Often it is the quiet threat of emotional withdrawal, the unspoken message, comply or lose access. And this is where the modern man becomes vulnerable. Not because women are evil, not because love is a trap, but because a man who has not mastered his own inner government will inevitably let someone else rule it. Here is the thesis, the spine of everything that follows, and it is brutal precisely because it is simple. A man who cannot enforce boundaries without anger will eventually purchase loyalty with self-abandonment, and the price will be his dignity. Read that again in your own mind. The issue is not whether you set rules. The problem is whether you have an internal structure strong enough to say yes and no without pleading, without punishing, without collapsing. Because boundaries are not walls. Boundaries are doors. They are the calm control of access. They're the ability to decide what enters your life, what leaves it, and what must remain outside without hatred, without chaos, without negotiation with your own weakness. Seneca understood that the mind becomes miserable not because life is hard, but because the man becomes ungoverned. He warned that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and in modern relationships that sentence becomes an X-ray. The man is rarely destroyed by what the woman actually does. He is killed by what he imagines he must do to keep her. He imagines that if he asserts himself, he will lose her. He imagines that if he does not tolerate disrespect, he will be alone. He imagines that his worth depends on being chosen, so he shapes his behavior around fear. And fear never creates loyalty. Fear creates compliance, and compliance always breeds contempt. Seneca wrote about the difference between what is in your control and what is not. You cannot control another person's desire. You cannot control another person's loyalty. You cannot control whether someone stays, but you can control the terms upon which they are allowed to remain in your life. And here the modern man makes a catastrophic trade. He tries to control outcomes by surrendering standards. He tries to buy certainty by becoming smaller. He confuses flexibility with virtue. He calls it patience. But it is not patience. It is timidity disguised as morality. Watch the modern scenarios where this plays out. A man meets a woman and the chemistry hits like a drug. He tells himself he's being open. He replies instantly. He cancels plans with friends. He shifts his gym schedule. He stays up late to be available. He ignores the first minor boundary violations because he is afraid to ruin it. She becomes inconsistent, warm one day, distant the next. He panics. He tries harder. He sends longer messages. He offers more explanations. In his mind, he is proving devotion. In reality, he is teaching her that access to him requires no respect, only mood. Another man is already in a relationship. He senses a drift. She criticizes him more. She tests him more. He tries to communicate. But communication becomes court testimony. He is always defending himself. He is constantly apologizing. He is always negotiating his own preferences as if they were crimes. He believes love means smoothing every edge. He does not see that he is erasing the very shape that made him attractive in the first place, his direction, his steadiness, his self-possession. A third man is married. He is a provider. He works. He handles responsibilities. But he has no boundaries around his peace. He allows constant disrespect in the household because he fears conflict. He tells himself he is keeping the family together. Yet his children watch him lose himself. They learn what a man is by watching what he tolerates. He becomes a ghost, in his own home present, helpful but not respected. And the tragedy is not that he is unloved. The tragedy is that he slowly comes to accept being unlovable by abandoning his own spine. Seneca would look at these men and say what he always said, in different forms: you are not suffering because of her. You are suffering because you handed her the keys to your inner life. You made your tranquility dependent on a variable you cannot command. And when tranquility depends on another person's behavior, you are not in a relationship. You are in captivity. There is a line Seneca gives that has the cold clarity of a blade: if you wish to be loved, love. But he did not mean perform. He did not mean plead. He meant act from a place that is internally free. The Stoic does not offer love as a bribe. He offers love as a choice. And there is a difference so significant that it can split a life in two, because boundaries are not cruel. Boundaries are the calm statement: my life is not negotiable, my time is not cheap, my principles are not for sale. If you want access to me, it will be on terms that preserve my dignity. And paradoxically, this is precisely what secures loyalty, not because it forces someone, but because it creates a stable structure that instinct can trust. Women do not respect a man because he suffers. They do not feel safe because he is endlessly available. Nature is not impressed by self-erasure. Nature reads structure. Nature reads steadiness. Nature reads whether a man can withstand pressure without begging for mercy. Now we go inside the mechanism. Because most men do not choose to lose themselves, it happens in increments. It happens the way a building collapses, not with one dramatic explosion, but with small compromises in the foundation until the structure can no longer hold weight. Phase 1 is numbness, denial, the beginning of the leak. The man tells himself everything is fine. He describes himself as anxious, which is normal. He describes himself as saying, "This is what dating is now." He tells himself he is being mature by not reacting. He calls his discomfort overthinking. He uses entertainment to sedate the sense that something is wrong. Late night scrolling, pornography, meaningless conversations, workaholism, anything to avoid the quiet truth that his self-respect is being taxed daily. He notices he is waiting for her replies. He notices his mood rises and falls with her attention. But he does not name it as a dependency. He calls it liking her. He does not recognize that he has begun to outsource his nervous system to someone else's behavior. What he thinks is happening, I'm just invested, I care, I'm romantic. What is really happening, through Seneca's lens, you have chained your tranquility to an external event. You have made your peace conditional. You have placed a fragile object, your inner stability, into hands that are not obligated to protect it. Phase 2 is justification, self-negotiation, the language of surrender. No minor boundary violations occur. A disrespectful comment masked as honesty, a cancelled plan with no apology, a flirtation with someone else done publicly, a comparison, a subtle threat. If you can't handle me, someone else will. The man feels the sting, but he swallows it. He tells himself she didn't mean it. He tells himself she has trauma. He describes himself as saying that if he reacts, he will be insecure. So he becomes a philosopher of excuses. This is where men lose themselves with a smile. They become experts in explaining away what their instincts clearly register as wrong. And every time he explains away disrespect, he teaches his own mind that his standards are negotiable when the reward is intimacy. What he thinks is happening, I'm being understanding. I'm patient. I'm not controlling. What is really happening, you are bargaining with your own boundaries. You are telling yourself that your dignity is flexible. You are training yourself to accept less than you know you require. And the mind, once trained, will repeat what it has learned, that peace is earned by surrender. Phase 3 is self-abandonment, the emotional kneeling. This is when the man begins to chase, not always physically, often psychologically. He overtexts. He sends long explanations. He tries to fix her moods. He tries to earn back warmth. He becomes reactive. He loses his routines. His training becomes inconsistent because his sleep is disrupted. His work suffers because his attention is fractured. He stops seeing friends because he is busy, but really he is in a private war fighting for certainty. He starts apologizing for things he does not believe he did wrong to restore harmony. He starts asking permission for his own preferences. He starts shrinking his personality to avoid conflict, and then something lethal occurs. He begins to resent her. Not because she's evil, but because his soul knows he is betraying himself. And resentment is what happens when a man cannot enforce boundaries openly, so he enforces them covertly through coldness, withdrawal, passive aggression, or silent punishment. Seneca would say this is not a strength. This is slavery with better furniture. I work with men who arrive at this point convinced they are dealing with a difficult woman, when in truth they are dealing with an undisciplined self. One man successful, respected in his industry, told me he felt as though he was always auditioning. He described his relationship as a job interview that never ended. He would rehearse texts before sending them. He would monitor her tone. He would avoid topics that mattered to him because they might trigger her. He believed he was maintaining peace, but what he was actually doing was paying rent to remain in his own relationship. When I asked him, calmly, what his boundaries were, he stared at me as if I had asked him to describe a country he had never visited. He could tell what she wanted. He could describe what she feared. He could describe what he was willing to sacrifice, but he could not explain the terms upon which he wanted to live. This is the modern tragedy. Men have become emotionally literate about everyone except themselves. Now, here is the contrast that cuts like a mirror. The man she later pursued looked similar on the surface. He was not necessarily richer, not necessarily more handsome, not necessarily more charismatic, but the difference was structural. That man did not negotiate with himself. He did not offer access to his time like spare change. He did not reply due to anxiety. He did not apologize for existing. His attention was not a public utility. And because of that, his presence had weight. Women are not drawn to cruelty, they are drawn to solidity. They test because nature tests, not to punish you, but to locate the foundation. And if your foundation is made of pleasing, her instincts will treat you like a structure that cannot hold. This is why boundaries secure loyalty, not because they control her, but because they reveal you. They indicate that your life has gravity, that you are not begging to be chosen, that you can withstand loss, and the ability to withstand loss is the hidden currency behind masculine power. Seneca would call this freedom, not freedom from women, but liberty from internal compulsion, freedom from the childish need to be approved, freedom from the fear that solitude is death. And now we widen the lens, because the system matters. A man's private collapse is rarely only private. It is a response to an environment that rewards certain behaviors and punishes others. Dating apps have turned attraction into a market, not a community, not a slow social process, but a marketplace of endless options. In a market, attention is currency. In a market, scarcity increases value. In a market, the man who gives everything away early is treated like a cheap product, not because he is worthless, but because the market interprets his behavior as proof of low value. Social media amplifies comparison. A woman does not only compare you to men in her life, she compares you to curated archetypes, images of lifestyles, physiques, experiences, and abundance. The male mind, already vulnerable to performance anxiety, begins to believe he must compete constantly. And when a man thinks he is always competing, he starts over-investing to secure his position. He becomes a candidate rather than a leader. He becomes a supplier rather than a sovereign. Public shaming has changed the risk profile of male initiative. Many men are not withdrawing from love, they are withdrawing from ambiguity. They sense that one misstep can be reframed as a moral failure. They feel that boundaries can be interpreted as controlling. They think that refusal can be punished through social narratives. So they become cautious, and caution, when it becomes fear, becomes self-erasure. Work culture adds another layer. Many men live under constant evaluation. HR language, reputational risk, professional consequences. In such an environment, a man may learn to suppress conflict everywhere. He becomes trained to avoid friction, and then he brings that same policy into his relationship. He avoids confrontation, avoids stating needs, and avoids enforcing standards. He calls it maturity. But it is institutionalized fear. Then there are legal realities, divorce laws, custody battles, and financial exposure. A man becomes aware that intimacy is not only emotional, it is contractual as well, and this awareness can create a quiet paranoia. Some men respond by becoming bitter, cynical, and cruel. Others react by becoming even more pliable, hoping compliance will prevent conflict. Both responses are forms of slavery. One is loud, one is silent. The attention economy feeds on male weakness because male weakness is profitable. An anxious man consumes, he buys courses, he buys distractions, he buys validation, he buys pornography, he buys status, he becomes easier to manipulate. And the man who is easy to manipulate cannot be loyal to himself, so he cannot inspire loyalty in others. Seneca lived under an empire that tested men. He would recognize this civilizational fatigue, the sense that life is saturated with noise, options, stimuli, and yet the soul feels poorer. He would say that luxury is not only wealth, luxury is living without inner discipline. And nothing destroys a man faster than comfort without sovereignty. Here are the lines you must carve into your memory, because they will expose your life like a spotlight. If you cannot say no without trembling, your yes is not love. It is fear. A woman does not destroy your peace. She reveals whether you ever owned it. When you trade your boundaries for affection, you do not gain intimacy, you lose yourself. If a system demands your emotional exposure but offers no protection, withdrawal is not cowardice, it is a strategy. And the darkest one, the man who begs for loyalty, teaches the world that loyalty is optional. Staying blind has a cost. It costs your mission first, because the mission requires sustained attention, and attention is the first thing you surrender when you become romantically reactive. It costs your self-respect next, Because every time you tolerate what you know is wrong, you fracture your identity. It costs your relationships with other men. Because shame isolates, it costs your health. Because anxiety is a tax on the body, it costs your future family. Because children cannot learn strength from a father who has no boundaries around his peace. And then, after years, it costs your capacity to love. Because when a man repeatedly abandons himself, he eventually concludes that love is humiliation. He becomes numb, he becomes cold, he becomes transactional, not because he is evil, but because he is trying to protect what he never learned to protect, his inner freedom. Now we come to integration, not tips, not slogans, behavior, architecture, sovereignty in action, because Stoicism is not an aesthetic, it is a discipline of the will. Notice the invisible pattern of emotional kneeling. Most men do it without realizing. They treat her moods as weather they must appease. They apologize to restore warmth. They over-explain to prevent misunderstanding. They chase clarity. They chase closure. They chase reassurance. But reassurance is a drug. The more you consume, the more your nervous system demands. A sovereign man does the opposite. He does not chase emotional weather. He observes it. He allows her to react while he remains steady. He does not punish her for being human. He refuses to participate in dynamics that require him to beg. He communicates once, clearly, without theatricality, and then he returns to his life, not as a tactic, but as a truth. His life is not centered around her approval. Refuse the pattern of mission abandonment. Most men believe romance requires constant availability. They allow their schedule to become porous. They cancel commitments. They skip training. They reduce their goals to make space for a relationship that is not yet stable. They do this in the hope that it will be appreciated. It is rarely appreciated, because what is being evaluated, often unconsciously, is whether you have a life worth joining. A Stoic man keeps his mission central not because he is selfish, but because his mission is his spine. A relationship without a spine becomes a swamp of emotion. He does not make her his purpose. He invites her into the structure of his purpose, and if she cannot respect that structure, she is not compatible with it. It is not a tragedy, it is information. Stop the pattern of overexposed vulnerability. Modern culture tells men to be vulnerable, but it rarely teaches men how to be sovereign while vulnerable. Many men confess their fears early, not from intimacy, but from anxiety. They disclose as a plea, "Please understand me so you won't leave." This is not a vulnerability, this is bargaining. Seneca would insist that emotional honesty must come from strength, not from need. A man can share his inner world without making it a demand. He can reveal himself without placing responsibility for his stability onto her. He can say calmly, "This is what I feel," without implying, "Now you must fix it." That is the boundary, even inside vulnerability. You own your inner weather. Refuse comfort addiction. Most men avoid discomfort because discomfort feels like rejection. They avoid difficult conversations. They avoid stating standards. They avoid saying, "This does not work for me." They postpone boundaries until they explode. Then they become harsh. They become dramatic. They become dramatic. And they call that finally standing up for myself. A Stoic man does not wait for resentment to make him cruel. He enforces boundaries early, quietly, with minimal words. He does not argue. He does not litigate. He states what he will and will not participate in. Seneca would tell you to keep your mind untroubled, to meet insults with calm, to meet chaos with a steady hand. The point is not dominance. The fact is self-respect. And here is the deepest integration except loss. Most men cannot enforce boundaries because they cannot accept the possibility that she will leave. Their boundaries are hostage to their fear. So their standards become suggestions. Their values become negotiable. Their life becomes a courtroom where the verdict is always dependent on her mood. A sovereign man accepts in advance that anyone can leave. That is not pessimism. That is freedom. He does not cling. He does not threaten. He does not plead. He does not chase closure. If she chooses to withdraw because he maintains his dignity, then her loyalty was never loyalty. It was convenient. Seneca would call this the discipline of desire. You want, but you do not need. You prefer, but you do not collapse. You love, but you do not kneel. Now I will show you the two paths, because every man listening stands at a threshold, whether he admits it or not. If you ignore this, you will become more efficient at self-betrayal. You will grow older, and your tactics will become more sophisticated, but the pattern will remain. You will give too much too early, tolerate too much too long, and then erupt or withdraw. You will repeat the same loop with different faces. You will become suspicious of women while secretly craving their approval. You will build a life that looks stable from the outside and feels hollow inside. You will work, consume, distract yourself, and call it adulthood. And one day you will realize you have become a man who does not trust his own yes or no, because you have spent years violating both. You will be more bitter, not necessarily loud, but internally acidic. You will interpret loyalty as something that cannot exist. You will treat love as a negotiation. You will become the kind of man who demands reassurance because he cannot generate peace from within. And that need will repel the very devotion you crave. If you answer this, the first cost will be loneliness, not permanent, but real. Because when you stop kneeling, certain connections dissolve. When you stop overgiving, certain people disappear. When you stop being available for disrespect, you will feel the vacuum where your old patterns used to live. And the mind will panic. It will tell you you are doing something wrong. It will tell you you are being cold. It will tell you you will die alone. Ignore it. If you answer this, you will become quieter, not because you are defeated, but because you no longer need noise to feel alive. You will choose fewer people. You will tolerate less chaos. Your days will have structure. Your sleep will deepen. Your training will become consistent. Your work will sharpen. Your friendships will become more honest. Your relationship to women will become clearer, not hatred, not worship clarity. And women who are capable of loyalty will sense it. Not because you are playing games, but because your life has boundaries that indicate self-respect. They will feel the difference between a man seeking a mother and the man seeking a partner. They will feel the difference between a man who wants to be saved and a man who is already standing. In 5 to 10 years, if you take this initiation, you will not be perfect. You will not be invulnerable. But you will be your own master. Your nervous system will belong to you again. Your time will have weight. Your yes will mean something. Your name will be clean. And because of that, the loyalty you receive, romantic or otherwise, will be loyalty to a real man, not loyalty to a performance. Now we return to the truth in new words, merciless and straightforward. If you cannot hold your boundaries calmly, you will eventually trade them for affection. And the moment you trade your dignity for love, you lose both. The mirror line is this: she is not the executioner of your peace. She is the environment that reveals whether you ever built it. You do not need to become cruel. You do not need to become cynical. You do not need to treat women as enemies. You need to become governed. You need to become internally disciplined enough that desire does not write your decisions and fear does not dictate your standards. Seneca's lesson is not to avoid love. It is to stop placing your life on someone else's altar. Boundaries are the calm power that secures loyalty because they reveal something rare, a man who does not abandon himself to be chosen. If something in you recognized itself in these words, keep this work alive. Share it with a man who is silently negotiating his dignity away. Subscribe and return to this material when you feel yourself slipping into old bargains. And remember the final sentence, the one that stands alone like a carved inscription in stone. A man who guards his inner freedom with calm boundaries becomes impossible to replace.